We shall now go on to our first speaker in this session, Dr. Niroj Kumar Sahu, who's a clinical faculty, retina and vitreous at LV Prasad Eye Institute, to talk on central bokeh abnormalities and EIFL. On to you.
Good evening, everyone. So at the outset, I'd like to thank Dr. Chitra and AIOS for giving me this opportunity. So I was asked to speak about the central bokeh abnormalities and EIFL. So I'll be dividing the talk into three aspects: what's, how's, and why's of this entity. So let us come to the first objective. What is the central foveal bokeh? So it was first known as the Rochon-Duvinol bokeh of central cones, which was less than 100 microns in diameter and consisted of around 2000 of the thinnest cone photoreceptors. However, it was later on by Yamada and Gass who described the presence of a Muller cell cone, which is nothing but a plug of tissue at the center of the foveal cone. Thus, we can describe the central bokeh as a dense array of cone photoreceptors along with Muller cells in the central foveal region. So what abnormalities can this structure have? The CB abnormalities can be divided into three categories. First is the presence of a cotton ball sign. Second, presence of a foveolar detachment. And third, an acquired vitelliform lesion. So let us go one by one for each one of them. First one is a cotton ball sign. So it is a thick, roundish, fuzzy, hyperreflective area that is present between the inner segment of ellipsoid zone and the interdigitating zone, as we can see here in the yellow circle. And it is due to the misalignment of the photoreceptors that causes differential reflectivity that gives rise to this kind of a picture. Next is the foveolar detachment. As the name indicates, it is again when the traction increases, it exceeds the addition between the photoreceptors and RPE that results in detachment of the cones from the RPE, resulting in a small neurosensory detachment. Next comes the acquired vitelliform lesion. These are dome-shaped hyperreflective material in the subretinal space that extends from the ellipsoid zone to the RPE. And again, it is due to the chronic separation of the cone from the RPE. So when the debris gets accumulated and overcomes the physiological capacity of the RPE to pump it back, it results in accumulation, and this material can result in disruption of the morphology and physiology of RPE photoreceptor complex. This vitelliform lesion again can migrate upwards into the inner retina, and along with of small zone. This can again decrease vision in some patients. So how are they formed? Two models have been described by Govetto et al. So the first one involves the parafoveal Muller cells, as we can see here. These are Z-shaped cells with the attachment to the cones being vertical. So when there is traction from the ERM, it results in pull of this vertical part of this Z-shaped Muller cells, resulting in the traction being transmitted to the central bokeh. The next model here was that according to this model, these eyes may or may not have vertical arrangement of Muller cells in the inner retinal layers at the center of the fovea. And these vertically arranged Muller cells, you can see here, can directly transmit the traction force by the ERF to the central foveal bokeh. So the sequence of progression of the central bokeh abnormalities can be visualized through these diagrams. The Muller cells having no traction on the cones, resulting in no distortion of the central bokeh. When the traction increases, it initially forms the cotton ball sign, which again increases to form the foveolar detachment, followed by the vitelliform deposits. And sometimes the deposits may migrate into the inner retinal layers, along with some amount of disruption of ellipsoid and ELM. Brings us to the second objective. What is ectopic inner foveal layers? So before going into the description of this entity, we need to understand the newer OCT-based classification of ERM, which was again proposed by Goveto et al. In 2017. The first stage is the stage of mild ERM with negligible or no morphological or anatomical distortion of the central fovea. You can see only the ERM is present, no abnormalities at the center of fovea. The second stage, where the ERM progresses and there is progressive retinal distortion, resulting in the foveal depression being lost. We can also see here that the outer nuclear layer is stressed and wide. But it is the stage 3 that has been described to have the ERM along with the continuous ectopic inner foveal layers. So what exactly is the ectopic inner foveal layers, or EIFL? So this is presence of a continuous hypo or hyperreflective band that extends from INL and IPL across the fovea, and this can be seen in all OCT scans centered around the fovea. Why hypo and hyper? Because you can see here the INL is continuous here and it can be seen as a hypo, and the IPL also can be seen. The continuation of this can be seen as a hyper band at the central thickened EIFL. Again, the stage 4 has the presence of ectopic inner foveal layers along with distortion and thickening of the anatomical structures at the inner macula. So, these stages represent a continuous evolution of the process of ERM formation. And this can be illustrated in another example here, where this patient presented to us with a vision of 2030. And we can see here a presence of a stage 3 ERM. We can see ectopic inner foveal layer along with a wide outer nuclear layer. And this patient was actually observed initially for 2 years. The patient came back with a distortion of the inner foveal layers with a drop in visual acuity. This we classified as, again, a stage 4 ERM. So why is it important to clinically know about these entities? ERM stages and the central foveal bouquet abnormalities tend to have some correlation. It was seen by Goveto et al. Again that the CB abnormalities have the highest frequency in stage 2 ERM.
So 1 minute remaining.
In stage 3 ERM and 4 ERM, because of the EIFL, there is usually less amount of CB abnormalities. So is EIFL protective for CB abnormalities? Again, it was described with the help of this model of Spring and Masses, where described that due to the EIFL, the force transmitted by the Muller cells by the ERM gets decreased when it reaches the central foveal bouquet, and resulting in less of abnormalities. Again, correlation of visual acuity. Patients with cotton ball sign, that is earlier stages of CB abnormalities, do better, have a better visual acuity, while the foveal detachment and the vertiform lesion group have a worse visual acuity. Again, eyes with higher central foveal thickness and EIFL and stage 3 and stage 4 all three have lesser visual acuity. Even in terms of surgical outcome, it has been seen that patients who have a stage 2 EIFL, they do better structurally. As you can see from this graph, that at the end of 12 months, almost 71% of eyes develop stage 1. And whereas in stage 3 and stage 4, the majority of eyes remained in stage 3 ERM. Even for functional outcome, a patient with stage 2 did much better than stage 3 and stage 4. So, but there was one more study by Brinkman et al. Where they found actually that the ERM stage and the CB abnormality actually did not correlate with the visual acuity, and the p-value, as you can see here, is not significant. However, we can see some amount of benefit if we do surgery early. The mean visual gain was slightly better in eyes who had a lower stage of CB before surgery. So I'll just like to end with these two case scenarios. These were two cases where we had two stage 2 ERM which were operated and resulted in a very good anatomical and functional outcome in both the patients. Whereas in another case where there was a stage 3 ERM, it was operated, although there was some amount of restoration of the inner foveal structures, the visual acuity did not improve to the extent that the other two cases did. So take-home messages from my presentation: presence of high grades of CB abnormalities can correlate with the worse visual function. Presence of EIFL can be protective against formation of CB abnormalities, and early stages of ERM may have better structural and functional outcomes after surgery. Thank you.
That was a wonderfully crisp talk, Dr. Niroj. Thank you very much. Dr. Srinivas?
Yes, madam. Thank you, Niroj. That was really a wonderful question. I have my question. Dr. Raja is here.
He
Has
said
not
he's
joined.
here
I think
so far.
Dr. Unni and Dr. Anand Rajendran can. Sir, we all know that stage 3, stage 4 are having the worst visual prognosis. So it has been a better counseling tool nowadays for the patients when we do the ERM surgery and show them these OCT findings. Other than that, we also have the pseudo hole formation when the CMT increases more than 400, where there is a EZ disruption. All these are considered as the prognostic factors. So how best can we utilize this as a counseling tool for our patient as a prognostic factor?
So thank you, Srinivas, and thank you, ma'am, for the invitation. I'll just start by taking this one. Thank you. So what is very interesting here is that this is one of the first biomarkers which give us the point of intervention and why. It's very, very significant. The CB abnormality development, there is a point in which you have the cotton ball opacity and the point of foveolar detachment. One particular point is that there is some reversal of the CB abnormality when the traction is relieved at this point, which means the development of the foveolar detachment has been thought to be a reversible sign. After that, which the vitelliform is not a reversible sign. Vitelliform is more associated naturally with RP abnormalities. That is one point. The second point is EIFL. We're talking about not only visual recovery after ERM surgery, we're talking about structural recovery. So the structural recovery and the better foveal contour after an ERM surgery is better before the EIFL forms. So you put 2 and 2 together. For the first time in our clinical experience now, we have 2 tools that tell us when to operate. It is not bad to operate early. You don't look at 6.6 or 6.9 or 6.12 like we used to. Okay, we don't operate this ERM because it is 6.9. No. When you find these features, you know there is a natural progression into a stage of irreversibility. And that is what these 2 biomarkers tell you. That is, at what point of time there is surgical irreversibility. That is, after surgery, the OCT findings do not recover to the previous features. So that is the most key point about these 2 biomarkers.
Wonderful. Very rightly said. Anand sir, a quick question.
Yeah.
Is there any other prognostic factors you look into it apart from the CBs and the EIFL when we are treating with the ERM surgeries?
Yeah, so I mean, one is, as Uni mentioned, that these are factors that we intuitively believe may be reversible. But what the science shows us is that, especially with EIFL, though it's seen in stage 3 and stage 4, ERMs, once it is onset, you will never ever reach the point of satisfaction for that patient by doing a surgery. So that is one thing. And of course, I do believe that visual acuity is also important from a patient's perspective. So that for me still is part of the criteria. The third thing I would like to add on to say is look at schisis, sciatic membranes, anything which is leading on to so much of schisis, as you showed in, I think, your stage 3, one here, that is onset. That for me is again a poor prognostic. There will also be many other markers. There's EZ disruptions, there's ORDs. We are going to talk about LHCP. I won't want to jump the gun here. This whole program is going to talk about all that, and we're going to be, I could talk on for 10 minutes on that. I will stop short of saying that a lot of these structural markers which are going to follow, in fact, at the next talk, it's we're going to talk about LHCP and ERM and other stuff like that. So all these structural factors, as opposed to a pristine macula with a thin ERM sitting on top like a cap, those are all going to, in some ways, show us, prognostic markers. So all those, for those reasons.
Thank you, sir.